Welcome to Career in Ruins, where this week we're 15 minutes late because Derek was playing computer games. He was a postman chasing off zombies. That's how much he cares about you people. That's how much he cares.
I suppose technically it was sort of undead ghosts, but yeah, I was very engrossed.
Oh, well, that makes it all right, actually. So why didn't you say that when you mentioned it in the first place?
I'd like to take this moment to apologise to our guest, apologise to Lawrence, apologise to our listeners and to our Patreons for the imposition.
And also apologise to your wife for me phoning her and asking you to get off your computer game and come and do a podcast.
Very, very angry.
Good. How are you? All right?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm having a grand day today, not least because I was massively engrossed in a game, but I got my camper out of the driveway for the first time in what feels like months, which is nice. Tidied it out, had a good drive, getting it ready to do some hopefully geophysics in the near future, but I'll say nothing about that because that's a bit secret. We've got some exciting time teamy stuff coming up.
We have, but also we've been doing exciting Career in Ruins bits. We've been out in the field again.
Oh, I'll get back to that. I was building up to that.
We don't care about that. This is Career in Ruins.
Oh, but we went to an opening. We had a nice day out. We saw some boats.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, if anyone is anywhere near Poole Museum, they should go. Not because necessarily of the Maritime Gallery, which is pretty good.
It's a great
But
draw.
currently on the third or fourth floor, they've got a bunch of big screens, giant projector screens all around the room. And they're sort of playing these almost 90s Windows-esque graphics. And I thought, this is a bit weird. What's going on up here? This is supposed to be a museum. I came here to see some boats, gosh darn it. And I wandered in and suddenly there was a blobby version of me in there on the screen. And I was interacting with all of these shapes and things. It was very strange and very weird and highly recommended when you need a break from the boats downstairs.
Don't say it, 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 don't say it.
I know I'm
blobby
always
version
blobby.
of you, you say.
I left the door wide open on that one, didn't I? We've got that coming up, and I was looking through Greece today. So we've got a Greece video coming to
Greece is the word.
Which features lots of Lawrence being very, very good and very pro, which is ace.
And you.
Oh, yeah, true. And lots of cool colleagues from around the world doing really good archaeology. So winter's going to be very Lawrence and Derek heavy in the time team, which is what I wanted to celebrate, really.
Oh, that's cool. But also, it's Lawrence and Derek heavy in the world of Career in Ruins because you are currently editing a program and I am currently editing a program. It's an edit off.
I know. It's a big time for Career in Ruins because obviously we've got the podcast and we've got an exciting guest coming up today. And this is our bread and butter, it's fair to say. And getting these out every week-ish, week adjacent, is really important to us. But we've taken a leap. We've got two, do we call them documentaries, vlogs? What do we call them?
Let's call them mini episodes.
Mini episodes.
People will have mini episodes afterwards.
Yeah, so we've got some proper video content coming, and we're both learning to edit in parallel in the spirit of Career in Ruins. It's sort of competitive editing at the moment. I got off to an early start, but it's fair to say Lawrence is in top gear at the moment.
Yeah, but you've got 4 times as much footage, so
that is true. So it's an interesting race. We will almost certainly finish about the same time as we encourage each other along the way. But that's probably coming in the new year. What do you think, Laz? We haven't even discussed this.
Yeah, even more to the point, today I booked a Roman to go back to one of our sites, and that's going to happen in December. So yeah, that it won't be out before Christmas.
So I see. So you're not satisfied with the volume of content you've got to edit. So you've strong-armed a couple of Romans in to go and make some more footage.
As you do. Yeah, I phoned the Roman up. They said yes.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. Now, I need to go back to my lateness a little bit because I was thinking an awful lot this evening about archaeology in video games.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it sounds a little bit archaeology adjacent, post-apocalyptic, all of that. And I think I've talked a little bit about it before when I was equally as engrossed in Fallout 4 recently. How there's a game mechanic that feels very archaeological, and it seems to be repeated across games. And this one has it too, where you're roaming around in this open world and you're doing the gamey tasks. In this one, it's delivering packages and every now and again fighting off an undead something or other. Still don't really know what they are. I haven't figured that out yet. But the whole story is pieced together by artifacts and little bits of the past, and you find them along the way and you pop them into a computer and it says, "Oh, you have found another bit of info on the past. This is the story developing." And this one particularly, the story is so opaque. The only way you understand what's going on is through these little archaeological artifacts.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good. I thought you were going to say it's got a relevance to your archaeology career where you just turn up late.
And there's that too. But I think as I was researching for Career in Ruins, I don't think we can describe it as lateness, really.
I'm not bitter. That sounds cool. So this idea of finding artifacts and past human activity, I guess that's a bit like Fallout. Are you not just moving into the world of post-apocalyptic content as opposed to games?
There does seem to be a theme emerging, but I wonder how many games have that similar content or that similar mechanism of revealing the story through essentially historical documents and archaeological artifacts. They don't explicitly say it. It doesn't seem to be kind of front and center, but it seems to be a core game mechanic I'd never really appreciated before.
I think you should go away and play more computer games and then come back to the next week's podcast and tell us more about it.
Shall I do that on time? I mean, the other game I just downloaded was Cricket 26, which I don't think has the same mechanic.
Ashes start on Friday. I can't wait. Anyway, we're getting distracted. Come on.
We can't make that relevant.
Right, let's stop waffling. Let's introduce our guest for today's podcast, and we are in good company today because this individual is an archaeological graduate from Bournemouth University. So today we are joined by the director of Heritage Consultancy at Cotswold University.
Cotswold
Archaeology, Rob Sutton, and Rob is an expert at assessing the impacts of new developments on buried archaeology, historic buildings, and historic landscapes. Rob, welcome to Career in Ruins. How are you doing?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. You've mentioned an exciting guest coming on this afternoon. Do they follow me or?
Yeah, we'll get you out of the way first, and then if we keep this snappy.
If you want to talk about the Ashes for 5 minutes or 50 minutes or 5 hours, you've got the right caller.
Excellent. All right, yeah, let's just do that. Perfect. We're going to win, right? We're going to win.
No, absolutely no chance. No.
My worst fears are that we're going to win the first 2 tests and then lose the preceding 3.
3-1 against us, 1 draw, lost to rain.
Sounds logical. On that depressing note, Rob, welcome to Career in Ruins. Thank you so much for giving up your time this evening and for bringing a really exciting angle to the podcast that we've not necessarily had today. It's around commercial archaeology, around heritage consultancies. We're not looking at people digging in fields and we are looking at people digging in fields, but we're also looking at the bigger picture. We're looking at how we facilitate and deliver big commercial projects, industrial projects in some instances, whilst getting it across so many different lines and thinking about so many different variables that the historic environment and archaeology influence. So whilst I've probably not done your job anywhere near a good enough service there, Rob, please tell us about your career in ruins and how you got to where you are today.
Well, if you don't mind me turning the narrative upside down a little bit, I'll tell you what I've done this week at work already, 1 day in, to give you a flavour of the kind of things that have influenced my trajectory from 30 years ago at Bournemouth University to being where I am today. Because as you kindly said at the beginning, I do introduce myself, which sounds horrendously pretentious, as an expert, but I act as an expert witness during public inquiries on planning matters, specifically giving advice and expert opinion advice, both orally and written, on a variety of matters to do with heritage. As you said, buried archaeological remains sometimes. the setting and experience of heritage assets, and the way in which new developments and change can influence our historic environment and historic landscapes. Yeah, from that perspective, I've had 25 years, just checking the date, 25 years as a professional archaeologist. And a large part of the latter part of that point of my career, I've been putting myself forward as an expert witness. But let's go, right back to my first forays in archaeology and history. And as my mum still says today, it was obvious that I was going to be an archaeologist or an actor, because it's about storytelling. And at the end of the day, I've been telling stories to whoever would listen to me since I was 3 years old. I would stop a stranger in the street and tell them something that had been interesting that had happened to me. So there was no stopping. There was, like I said, an inevitability about this. At the age of 7, when we was all into dinosaurs, like most boys and girls are when they're 7, and to be honest, I probably wanted to be Harrison Ford. As space pirate hadn't been invented as a career yet, I decided to go for archaeologist. A fortuitous conversation with a headmaster of my senior school when I was about 13 years old, just after PPG 16 had come into force in 1990. And he said, you can be an archaeologist and it's a job and stuff. And I went, no, that changes everything.
Tell me.
Because I was going to be an accountant, because I thought it made loads of money. And then in the side, I could play storytelling. But then I realised I could be paid to be a storyteller. And yeah, I've found some opportunities to go on some digs. And at the age of 16, 2 weeks into a 4-week excavation at Waltham Abbey with West Essex Archaeology Group, the site director said, "Rob, I'm going away for a few days. Look after things, can you?" So I was a 16-year-old running an excavation in the scheduled monument of Waltham Abbey, So again, there was, it's funny because I know some people who know me quite well and other people that might not see me as a head of an important part of a successful business, and they see me occasionally wearing suits and ties. And I go, no, I'm an archaeologist. Literally, there's 3 things that run through these veins. One of them is archaeology and heritage. One is cricket, and the other is chess. And they compete for my time. And I probably spend nearly all of my waking day across those 3 things. But yeah, so back onto the archaeology, I managed to scrape through with some very bad A-levels and some pretty mediocre GCSEs from a poor school and an average college in the mid-90s, and had a bit of a crisis of confidence and decided that I was going to go work at Games Workshop, because I was quite good at that. And sliding doors moment, I tried to go through clearing and left a message with Bournemouth University to see if they'd let me in, and I went down a pub and came back 3 hours later for 7 voicemails on my answer phone. Because remember those days you'd come home and see messages, yeah. And that's a true story. They left 7 messages for me, and I said yes, I'd love to come to Bournemouth University, but I haven't got very good A-levels and the GCSEs aren't great. And they went, no, you've held a trial before. Please come to Bournemouth University. And I was like, what? Your normal students have never dug before? And he went, none of them. None of them would have ever done anything like that at the age of 16 or 17 and done field walking at 18 and things like I'd done. So I was, they were chasing me, and I was attracted to that. And obviously the fact that I could go to university on the beach for 4 years was also particularly attractive, as we can all remember from the prospectus that was shown to us of what Bournemouth University was all about. And I say I was lucky because, I didn't really do my homework about Bournemouth University. For the reasons I've just described. But I realised quite soon into my time there in the mid-90s that it was a degree that taught me how to be an archaeologist, not about archaeology. And there isn't a day in my 25 professional years where I don't realise that teaching somebody to be an archaeologist is more important than teaching them about archaeology, if that's the career that they want to go into. And I have the fortune to lecture and give presentations at quite a few universities across the country today, and still every couple of years I go back to Bournemouth. Derek, we need another conversation about when I can come back to see you again.
Yeah.
And I'm going up to UCLan in February to do a couple of lectures up there for Jim Morris and his team up there about professional archaeology and the broad story around Heritage Consultancy. And the every time I go back to Bournemouth University. I say to the students there, I say, whether you realise it or not, you've already made the best choice you can if you want to become a professional archaeologist. And they think I'm being a bit smarmy. I'm like, no, I'm just being genuine. Those, and there are a few out there now, but there wasn't back in the 90s where there were very vocationally led courses where they really did teach you about going out in the field, working in the lab, how to be a professional, and it's really made a massive difference to me. And I'm sure lots of people you interview on your podcasts talk about the sliding door moments or the luck that they had here. They're in the right place at the right time. I think that was there was a degree of luck involved in that. I mean, I was at university for 4 years because I badly broke my hip and then broke my leg and missed my first year finals. So I had to repeat my first year again and do my exams again, but only after Bournemouth had kicked me out. And then I pleaded for Brisbane to take me back. And he went, oh, that sounds quite unlucky. Yeah, go on then. And he let me redo the year. So there have been some moments in that early part of the informative years of me learning the trade, which have made a big difference. And then I fell out of university in the year 2000 with a reasonably good degree, a very practical degree, moving into a market where there was a massive requirement for field archaeologists, specifically in London. There was a big property boom going on at the moment. They couldn't bring enough archaeologists into the Museum of London and other contractors that were operating in the southeast at the time. So it's the big property boom and need for lots of professional field archaeologists. And I walked out of university with nearly a year's worth of field experience built across the 4 or 5 years I've been working. So I walked straight into a contract which I thought would be that classic circuit digging, going around the country, digging for all different units. And they gave me a 6-month contract when I walked in the door. And after 1 month, they extended it to 12 months. And I worked indoors, digging a Roman house site in the city of London. Yeah, because it was in the basement of a large multi-story building, and then we moved into the car park at that multi-story building, and they built a roof over the top for us to keep us working efficiently. Wow. And I worked for nearly 12 months on the most fabulous piece of Roman archaeology that had probably been discovered since the war in London. An incredible mosaic floored townhouse that had burnt down in the Hadrianic fire. Well, we had painted wall plaster of dancing ladies still in situ, standing upright on top of mosaic floors. And I excavated a pantry in this house that had burnt down so slowly that the wooden shelves had burnt slowly enough that the pots just stacked rather than breaking. Oh. So I was literally excavating fully articulated stacks of pots, and we would go, "Did somebody want to eat their rice lunch out of this one?" Because it was just so I was incredibly spoilt by some fabulous archaeology, complex archaeology, really complex urban archaeology. I remember digging a floor layer that was vertical, a Roman floor layer that had collapsed and sumped over earlier Roman pits. So I was literally digging horizontal deposits going directly down. And that really kind of set me up to understand complex archaeological remains and the skills required to tease stories out of them. And I've been dining out on that for, like I said, for nearly 20 years. And that set me up for a career in field archaeology, which died almost instantly because at the end of that year on site, I badly bust my back, broke a rib from digging, found myself working in the office at Mola for about 3 months, writing up little orphaned reports and doing some complex Harris matrices on one of those big, massive computers that probably gave me cancer. And those big, massive ones in the old days. And it was a wonderful opportunity to learn that other side of commercial archaeology, which is a field archaeologist. You often don't get the chance except when it's luck or a bit of good timing. And in this case, I'd badly hurt my back. And an opportunity came along for a secondment to an engineering consultancy called Atkins. And the Museum of London had been doing a running 6-month secondment with them from the late 90s. And I put myself forward and was interviewed with 3 or 4 other far more experienced archaeologists than me. Derek, you know me, and Laurence, you know me a bit better. Armed my way through that.
Can't see that happening.
I just, Janet Miller, who was the director at the Heritage team at Atkins at the time, asked all the usual questions you ask of a an archaeologist in the field, and then said, yeah, but what you're really interested in? I said, I'm really interested in research agendas and how they don't actually set up priorities, but they just say everything's important. And she just looked at me and went, you start on Monday. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that was going to be a thing, but that was just the thing I was reading on the train on the way up. I managed to get myself onto this 6-month consultancy secondment with Atkins. And after the 6 months, which I think might have been extended to like 9 months or something like that for a variety of different reasons, I went back to Mola and I said, I've gained all these skills in writing desk-based assessments and assessing impacts and communicating with clients about the way in which we can manage archaeology into their programs of works and risk and things like that. I said, what are you going to be doing? And they said, we've got a 6-month watching brief, Fairford Airfield. How's that for you? I was like, well, that's really funny. I mean, genuinely, what shall I do? And they went, no, that's all we got. So I quit that afternoon, literally, just handed my notice in that afternoon, picked up the phone to Janet and I said, I know you've got this no poaching rule about the secondment at Atkins not taking the talent from the Museum of London, but what if I've quit? And she went, oh, well, I think that'd be all right. So I went back to Atkins a few days later and found myself working on a wide variety of projects that a big engineering consultancy like Atkins can offer somebody. There was only 4 of us in the team at the time, and over the near decade that I worked with Janet at Atkins, we managed to build that team to, I think at one point we had about 30 consultants working across about 10, 11, 12 different offices in the UK. We first worked out of the Epsom office, and then I moved to the London office and built a team in London. Then I moved to the Birmingham office and I built a small team around that in Birmingham. And then we had the confidence to expand out across into other offices, working a lot of the work we did was for the Highways Agency, back then National Highways now, helping those big construction companies understand the archaeology, develop programs of archaeological works and deal with that complex archaeology in advance of construction. But then we also had this other side part of our business, the 20, 30 of us, 50% of us working on those kind of development projects, slightly more traditional construction projects, but the other half doing conservation planning. And I had the opportunity to work on an excellent range of projects, mostly in the UK, but also overseas. Back in 2004, I managed to work on the World Heritage Site Management Plan for Bahala Fort in Oman, which really opened my eyes to understanding the way in which heritage is perceived differently by different communities, how different state actors and conservation professionals think differently about the philosophies involved in what makes things of heritage interest and how to manage those. I threw away, again, my Western European arrogance about there's a correct way of doing conservation, there's a correct way of understanding heritage. You throw yourself into the edge of the desert and ask people what's important to them about their heritage. You get some very different answers than the ones you do if you're in Portsmouth High Street asking people about their heritage. And I'm not saying one's different or better, one's better than the other. They're just very different from the very roots. And that experience of doing conservation planning work and helping us to understand what made places special and how to safeguard that and present that differently, I started realising that actually development control archaeology and advice to developers on managing their heritage issues and those who look after and own historic properties and historic places, at the end of the day, it's the same thing. What have you got? What's important about it? How can we manage that through the processes that you're taking it on? If it's somebody building something new, if it's somebody trying to show it off, if it's somebody telling a story about it, fundamentally they come from that same page. A really sound understanding of what's important and then trying to find a better way of communicating that to a wider audience as possible. And it might be about digging something up, or it might be about conserving something for another 1,000 years. But at the end of the day, that learning I got when I was at Atkins for nearly 10 years around those core themes really set me up for what was about 15 years ago, when I decided that I had a fear that I might be losing my way as an archaeologist a little bit at this big engineering consultancy Atkins, because I had certain skills that were being utilised outside heritage and archaeology. And although that was fun, like I worked on a major bid team with 5 other individuals bidding on a £2 billion project to when Buckingham County Council were going to outsource all of their built environment services. Archaeology and heritage had nothing to do with it, but I was deemed to be quite good at charming potential clients to win work. So I formed part of that team. And, for about a month, I had nothing to do with heritage, nothing to do with archaeology at all when I was working on those kind of things. I've done EIA coordination, for those of your audience that don't know about that. They're those big environmental statements that go with large planning applications that might have an archaeology and a heritage chapter, but there's an ecology chapter and a landscape chapter and a geology and geotechnical and noise chapter. And because I've been involved in the game for a long time, I found myself coordinating and organising those and helping them come together. And liaising with all of the variety of teams to get the best outcomes. But again, I was finding myself getting drawn away from archaeology and heritage a little bit. And I just, at the age of however old I was, 15 years ago, just took a little step back and thought, actually, there's an opportunity here for me to maybe get back to the archaeology a little bit. And I went to see Neil Holbrook at Cotswold Archaeology, and he offered me a job, and I've been there ever since. I've had a variety of jobs at Cotswold Archaeology as well, by the way. It's a really weird one. I've basically had about 10 different jobs in my life, but only 3 different companies. It's because I have loyalty, but I'm also really lazy. So I'm like, I really want to do something different, but I can't really be bothered to move from the seat I'm sat in. So is it okay if I just completely reinvent my job? And
I would have said versatile.
Yes, maybe. Yes, versatile. But again, still basically sedentary. And so, it's 15 years at Cotswold Archaeology. I've had a variety of jobs there as well. I've been broadly always leading the consultancy team in one shape or another. But when we decided we wanted to put a bit of extra energy and effort and investment into our fledgling Milton Keynes office about 10 years ago, I took over the operations of the fieldwork team and the PX team and everything that went with that, and worked on developing our client base, greater resilience around some of our staff and the key skills of the individuals I was working with, so we could bring more juniors in and develop those and grow those. And within a few short years, the Milton Keynes team had picked up some really big contracts, and we were actually about the same size as the rest of the company put together. And it was a really great opportunity for me to test some of the skills I'd had in that kind of sales and the marketing stuff, but it's still about archaeology, still about heritage, still about selling your competence, saying I'm the right person to speak to about your project. I can help you manage your risk, help you understand your archaeology. I can get better products out of the archaeology, stories to go with your project. And that's evolved over the last 15 or so years, and where I am today, leading a team of 25 heritage and archaeological consultants. It's great. I have people in my team that don't know the dates of the Bronze Age because they're not archaeologists. I won't say a multidisciplinary team. It's not like I've got ecologists or landscape consultants or geologists, but I've got architectural historians. I've got historic landscape specialists. I've got old school archaeologists and a variety of everything in between the two. And it's a real privilege to lead some highly talented and ambitious individuals. And, at the moment, a lot of my time is spent on seeing them grow and working and developing their skills as experts. But I do still look after a portfolio of maybe 20, 30 live projects of my own, which comes back to where I started my little introduction about being an expert. So this week, I have been advising a client on a large evaluation in the Birmingham city centre on a £2 billion redevelopment scheme, and we're the first spade in the ground, so we're going to be on the news in the next few days when the press comes out on that. I say in the next few days, I don't know when this podcast is coming out. Where are we? We're in mid-November.
Yes.
The press comes out in a couple of days, so that lines up perfectly. And I've been working on that project for nearly 15 years now, and it's the new market that's going to be built as part of a large new redevelopment in the city centre just south of the Bullring, if anybody knows Birmingham. And it's the site of the first House of Birmingham. Richard de Birmingham's house, moated house, 12th century, buried underneath a concrete slab. We've redesigned the scheme so that the new park, the new open space, maps the site of the old moat. Right now, we're doing a little excavation just beyond the moat, just to make sure that the new market that we're going to build there doesn't disturb the important buried archaeological remains. And hopefully I'm going to be across the press talking about 1,000 years of continuous market trading in the same square foot of Birmingham. I mean, sometimes when we talk about heritage, we talk about broken bits of pot, and we talk about designed landscapes, and we talk about old castles and that's heritage. That's that makes what little hair I've got on the back of my head still stand up when I talk about that kind of, there's a chap selling fruit and veg on Birmingham Market today, selling apples. And I look at him and go, somebody's been doing that for 1,000 years on exactly that spot. And I'm going to be talking about that and telling that story over the next few weeks. I've just done a listed building consent to retain some netting in a fine grade 2 listed building in London, where there's some fragility in the wall, the ceiling plaster. So we had to put some netting up to hold that in place. I'm an archaeologist, but I've been advising about the best ways to find solutions to look after that historic building. I've been exploring change this week as well, just on the train just now, coming home before I joined the call with you guys, about a new solar farm that's going to be built, hopefully, in Essex. And I'm putting together a statement of common ground with Historic England so that we can help the decision maker understand some really complicated arguments, because Historic England have one perspective, I have a slightly different perspective, about the way in which this solar farm might change the experience of a scheduled a scheduled moat and some historic buildings. And then lastly, after I get off the call from you, which will be at about 9 o'clock, or maybe a little bit later, I'm going to review. I'm telling everybody I'm doing work late at night. That's a bad idea. I'm not doing it. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, the first thing I'll do in the morning is I'll pick up a report about a piece of my own heritage that I've got the fortune to work on. I'm working on the demolition of the old sports centre. I used to play five-a-side football when I was 15 years old. In fact, it was the sports centre that had a play group in the upstairs room, which my mum took me when I was 3 years old. And that's my heritage as well. And that's part of 2 components of a project where the school we're renovating, an old bit of Victorian school that we're renovating, was the school my dad went to in the 50s. So when I was writing the statement of significance about this building and explaining the way the different changes had happened to the building from the 1860s to today, I got my dad in as a consultant to help me explain what happened to, why's that window there? And he went, oh yeah, that's a bit weird. Oh yeah, I remember now. Yeah, they pulled that down a bit. And, so an opportunity to work on projects which have got these powerful resonating heritage stories, but also sometimes just mundane ones, but they're mine. That keeps me going. And that's why I've been involved in archaeology for 25 years and why I have a career in ruins, Vince.
That's brilliant, Rob. Fascinating and diverse. And this might be a really mean question, but do you have a favourite part of all of that? Is it seeing the end of a big multi-billion-pound project, or is it seeing the hard work that you put in to get someone signing that dotted line for that project, or is it just delivering a project where you meet someone who's selling apples and is the umpteenth person that's been selling apples there for the last 1,000 years?
So, do you know what? It is a Sophie's choice, because that's such a diverse range of positive outcomes. They really are, right? There's a lot of buzzwords that go on at the moment regarding planning reform and finding more efficient ways of getting planning applications approved so we can grow, build more houses and do all the things we want to do as a country. And one of the buzzwords is enabler, not blocker. And often archaeology, heritage and other environmental specialists can be perceived as blockers, because they're saying you can't do that there, you've got to look after that, can't do that, can't do this, can't do that. I have seen great outcomes for heritage by changing the dialogue around saying, look what we can do here with the things you've got. Yeah. The amount of developments that take place on a blank slate where there's no great story to build on. There's no great narrative to bring the local community in so that they can join in on your project for a new housing estate or an extension or a road diversion or something as mundane as that. And I think an opportunity to see a project which is better for the heritage, for the local community, because I did a bit of background reading and I put my hand up and went, I've got a really great idea. This is going to be hard work, but I think if we all work on this, and that's often the case, the best projects are often the hard ones, the complicated ones, the ones where it's quite hard to tease stuff out. But the three questions I get asked as a professional archaeologist on a train or in the pub or even when I'm on site more than anything else is, one, how did you become an archaeologist? I've shared that story with you so far. Two, how does it get under a field in the farm over there?
That's a Philomena Kunk question.
Yeah, he said it. But do you know what? I've genuinely been asked that the second most of all of the questions. And then thirdly, can you explain the archaeology that you was about to tell me about? So I can have a whole Roman villa half exposed over my shoulder, but they say, how do you become an archaeologist? How did it get under the field? And actually, it's that probably. It's explaining to a layman something that's quite complicated, like depositional sequences and how a villa gets under the ground. And I think that's often something missing in archaeology, if I'll be honest with you. I remember a former colleague of mine saying, the reason you do well at work, Rob, is because you translate for the rest of us. And I thought that was a really cute thing to say. But what he basically said is that I'm quite good at picking the weird, complicated stuff up and saying, let's break this down and make it really understandable for as wide an audience as possible. And that's why I love listening to you guys, because Lawrence specifically, sorry, Derek, but Lawrence, I hear you do it quite often with your work at Forestry England, is explain sometimes complex interactions between cultural heritage and natural heritage and finding uses for these places in 21st century England and explaining them in a way that just brings people along with you. And that's a very powerful tool. So well done, Ian.
That's very kind of you to say. But it's not about me.
Oh, Rob, when you started talking, it's a rare occasion. I wrote down a question, which by the time you'd finished telling your story, the story of your life, I realised you'd answered it already, and I don't need to ask it. But I'm gonna save a question more as a statement rather than a question, because I wanted to cheekily ask you early on about your sliding doors moment. Do you ever regret not being an accountant? But it became absolutely clear within 2 or 3 minutes that you have no regrets there. You effuse joy about archaeology from beginning to end, and it was such a pleasure to listen to.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a running joke actually in archaeology, isn't it? Is that when I say to friends and colleagues about lecturing at universities or going to see a school and talk to them about the archaeology or college or everything in between the two, and I do take those opportunities. I'm hopefully going to go to my nephew's school in a few months' time, and he's only just 7, to talk about archaeology and heritage. Is that the joke is you can explain to them the best thing to do is get a trade, and that archaeology is tricky and it's hard and it's, and there's not a lot of money in it and all those things. I'm very well paid, gents. And for those listening, I do all right out of this. I've had to work hard at that. I've had to find niches within my industry where other people don't play, because if you've got a niche, you've often got an opportunity to excel within a certain narrow field. I'm one of maybe a couple of dozen people, maybe less than that regularly do public inquiry expert witness work. And now I don't get paid this, but I'm sure a lot of your listeners would be interested to hear about it. I'm happy to say on this podcast, I charge my clients for some of the work I do about £1,500 a day. That's a lot of money, but what I'm offering them is clearly worth that because of the projects that I work on. Again, I'll just repeat myself, I do not get paid £1,500 a day. For those of us that have an understanding of the way in which business works, I get a tiny, tiny fraction of that. But it is a reminder, actually, that the kind of money that does exist within certain parts of our industry, and more importantly, if you can find the right niche and you can find an expertise at something, in whatever industry you're in, or we happen to be in archaeology and heritage, you can actually do quite well for yourself. And by quite well for yourself, I mean have a car that is pretty beat up like my BMW is, and I do not quite own most of my house. So in those relative terms, I think it is an industry whereby which there is great opportunities for a variety of different individuals with a variety of different skill sets. And if you're a passionate storyteller like I know you two are, and I am too, better way to say, remember in the old days? And then just speak for 15 minutes.
That's really there's some really refreshing points in there, Rob, actually, and particularly about, I think it's easy for archaeologists to dwell on the lack of money, but actually, yeah, there's lots of layers to it and dynamics. And just a quick aside on the storytelling and acting, your idea of either want to be an actor or a storyteller when you're growing up. We had a Time Team episode go out last weekend about Cern Abbey, and my sister and my nieces and brother-in-law all live out in Seattle at the moment. They text me at 2:00 in the morning and woke me up. I didn't have my phone on Do Not Disturb, so I woke up and had a look. They were watching YouTube, watching Cern Abbey on live as it was going out, or just after. And my sister's like, Eve, one of my nieces, Eve's come out with a great statement. She wants to be an archaeologist, but she doesn't think she can make it because she's not as good an actor as Uncle Lawrence.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's all right. I think
I'll take it based on Rob's descriptions. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, joking aside, the reason I'm not an actor is that I can't actually memorize scripts.
Nor can we.
I really can't. I mean, you guys do TV and radio and things all the time, and I've just spoke without too much repetition, hesitation, I hope, for the last 20 minutes with no notes, no script. I'm waving a pen around in my hand for those that can see this on the podcast. And obviously, that doesn't work so well when you're on the stage. Not so much. I could do a pretty tight 5 minutes of stand-up, but any much more than that, it'd never be right for me. But yeah, there are those sliding door moments, and I actually just reflecting on the way in which our community is two grades of separation from everything. I've listened to 5 or 6 of your episodes recently. Okay, I've been selective and picking out ones of particular interest to me and people I might know, but everybody spoke about projects that I've worked on. So Mike Parker Pearson spoke about Clad Hallen. I dug at Clad Hallen. I dug at Clad Hallen in 1999 with him, the season before we found the bog bodies. I excavated a decapitated dog, which was one of my highlights of my career at that point in time. Iron Age one, not a recent one, before it gets weird. So yes, we all work in quite a small little world, even though you've said that you don't have had many speakers on from the commercial world. You've had perhaps a few more from academia. Actually, we're all quite linked up. And there's a lot of cross-fertilisation in what we do and how we work.
Excellent. Very good point. Very well made. So, Rob, what about pride? What's the thing that you're most proud of in that?
This is going to sound really geeky, but this is a geeky podcast.
Yeah, yes.
I mentioned earlier about some projects I worked on where my dad helped me out with the school, and I've recently worked on the proposed demolition of my old sports centre. So that's in Epping. I grew up in a little village called Cooperstown, just outside Epping, in the middle of Epping Forest. And one of the projects I worked on was for a listed building consent and planning application to demolish a 1960s council block of no architectural or historic interest at all. But it was stuck on the side of one of the finest postmodern pieces of architecture in Europe, a Grade 2 listed building that was opened in 1993. I was at the opening of that building in 1993.
Is that why it was Grade 2
and I
listed?
Worked. No, it's because it's a fine piece of Lego-styled 1990s postmodern architecture. It's a very beautiful, very attractive building. It's very, very clever. It won an award at the time, a competition, and got listed about 17 years after it was built, which is very rare for buildings to be listed, not only because they're that young, but that soon after it was built. I knocked down the old bit of the building to better reveal the young bit. Now, that is my weird bit of geeking, because in conservation and heritage, there are very few philosophies out there where you knock down the old bit to better reveal the young bit.
Beep, boop.
And that
Heritage
is exactly
radar
what
broken.
I did. Yes, that was proper geeky. Because I mean, you try to think, is there any scenario where I've got a 15th century castle where I knock down the 11th century bit? No, there is no scenario where you knock down the old bit to better reveal the new bit. And it makes sense. And so that's a funny little story. I don't know if I'm proud, but it's just one of those standout geeky moments. And I tell people, and people go, "Oh yeah, that's quite interesting." I'm like, "No, really bloody interesting."
You're in a safe space here, and I can see Lawrence's cogs whirring in his head, thinking about tearing down the old to save the new. So that's a decent example of pride. So the trickier one, though, is there anything you're envious of?
again, Lawrence, I think you know me well enough, and Derek maybe too. No, I don't have that envy gene. There's quite a few genes I don't have, which I could probably do with. I don't suffer embarrassment, much to the embarrassment of everybody who knows me, and which allows me to stand up in front of rooms of complete strangers and talk consistently without any issue at all, which is sometimes a bit of a gift, but it's a bit weird. And actually, I don't really have envy either, if I'm to be honest with you, because isn't that just another way of saying motivation? You see somebody doing something that entertains you and think that looks a bit good. I'll have a go at that, please. So I don't use it in that kind of envious sense, but just in a motivating sense. That looks a bit fun. Can I join in with you there? And I've been doing that since I was about 3 years old. So yeah, you could dress it up as me reacting and responding in an envious way, or just me being enthusiastic and motivated.
Is there anything that's really motivated you?
Apart from wanting to be Han Solo, but then see earlier comment about Space Pirate not existing yet. I think, yes, and at its heart, and it comes back to the golden thread that keeps running through this. When I hear people do not very good jobs about communicating interest in archaeology, it motivates me to get out. And, the whole put up or shut up thing. And I do hear very interesting stories about really interesting finds and really interesting heritage. Get occasionally, I know you said regularly. Is that rude? Okay, yeah, I do. I hear it regularly poorly communicated. And I think, do you know what? It's not that hard. It's not that hard. I read an article a couple of months ago about a nice, interesting Iron Age settlement site that had been discovered in Northamptonshire. And it was in a technical journal. It was probably about 16, 17 pages long. And the word house was used 0 times to describe the settlement of 7 houses. Penannula, Ringditch. All of these words were used to describe 7 houses that were inhabited in the Iron Age period.
That's
and
such a
stuff
relic
like that
of...
that motivates. But that was not an old article. Like
no, but
that was less than 10 years old. That article.
Yeah, but
there's a kind of nervousness about just using simple, not creative, just simple English terms to articulate and tell what would have been a really good little story, actually, about this interesting settlement in a part of West Northants. And so that motivates me. I'll be honest with you, gents. That motivates me to keep talking about archaeology, keep trying to find different ways of communicating and storytelling archaeology. I'm not so arrogant to think that I've mastered the art. I have not. I have most definitely not. I'm always listening. I'm going to make Lawrence blush again. I'll listen to professionals like you, trying to find alternative ways and different ways about communicating the thing that I love most, our histories.
So what I hear there, Rob, and thank you again. You can stop complimenting me there.
Checks in the mail.
You are envious of people who rest on their laurels and aren't willing to keep developing, and they can just sit back, enjoy the ashes, and not worry about bettering themselves.
No, I don't know. It's. I did mention earlier about the cricket and the chess, and actually, I'd spend a lot of time playing chess. I'll be honest with you. And I do think if I didn't play as much chess, I would have written quite a few books about maybe Iron Age settlements in Northamptonshire. I might have called them houses rather than penannula.
I don't know what you're talking about. Now, if you said penannula, I'd be with you. So we've done envy, we've done pride, or we haven't done envy, but that's actually a great answer for envy. Eric and I have got a working time machine. We've spent a few years improving it, modifying it. It's pretty cool, even if we do say so ourselves. It's got LEDs and loads of other cool things. But you, as a guest on the podcast, get a return ticket on it. And all we need to know is where you'd like to go and why.
When I'd like to go and where.
Yeah.
So like I said, I've listened to quite a few of your episodes, but not all, 100 of them. And maybe I should have done before I test this theory, is that I have almost no interest in going back to any particular time period to answer that special archaeology question. Because although I started by saying there's 3 things that run through my blood, cricket, chess and archaeology, actually there's a 4th, and it's partying. I love dressing up, I love going out, and I love dancing. So do you know where my time machine would take me? it would take me to Paris in 1899. Belle Epoque. And I know there are some very complicated social issues and things going on in Paris in 1889. But if I can just go out and party for a few hours in the streets of Paris, and I'm going to cheat because I'm then going to twist the dial on your time machine and jump out in Berlin in 1921 and party at a cabaret in Berlin. And then I'm going to twist your dial again and I'm going to jump out in Tehran in Iran in 1969 and go to a fashion show just before Iran became what it then became in the 70s. And I know those are both complicated periods of world history with lots of different social issues going on. But if I'm allowed to just party for a couple of hours, Paris 1899, Berlin 1920, Tehran 1969.
Great
I think more than most time machine requests, this is one I think we might just jump on board with.
Oh, yeah. I was worried for a moment you're going to be one of those people like, I'm going to go into the future. Yeah, all right, we've heard that one before.
Oh, no.
Don't be that obvious.
So two things. I like new things. So let the future come to me, not the other way around.
Yeah.
2, I'm not going back before penicillin. I'm not an idiot. You know, even if I'm only on the time machine for a little while, I could cut my foot and it could fall off, right? So I'm post penicillin, please. Thank you very much.
Oh, Rob, that is a fantastic use of a time machine. And yeah, I fully applaud it. Thank you so much for chatting to us today. The time has flown by, even with me being marginally late, which I still feel ashamed of deep down. I'm very grateful that you stuck around, and Lawrence, you stuck around too, so we could do the podcast. I could listen to you talk on and on and on, and I've still got a list of questions which I'm going to skip over because we're running close to the hour now, and you've got a report to read early in the morning, but genuinely lovely to hear your story. Lovely to hear that Bournemouth's aggressive recruitment strategy was the same in the 90s as it is today. Great to meet another member of the slightly questionable A-levels club. I don't know if you're in that club, Lawrence, or did you do well?
C's and B's.
That's better than me. I was E's and F's.
ACE, which obviously spells ace, but they weren't.
But the moral of the story is come to Bournemouth. It's a welcoming place.
Yeah, look where it got us.
Yes.
Other podcasts are available.
Sat at home chatting to each other about the cricket.
Well, thank you so much, Rob, and thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for our patrons for keeping our hosting alive and for making this possible. And we will catch you next week for an already lined up podcast with David Nash, geologist, Derek.
I look forward to it.